Hello, Intentional Clinician listeners. You are in for it today. I'm going to let you know up front, this episode contains possibly offensive language like swear words and other words that men use to describe one another. The reason that we're using this language in this podcast is because there is this book for men called Be Less Dickish, the definitive self-help book about men. And it's by David Coates and Corey Kilpack. And I had the amazing opportunity to interview both of them while we were all in different time zones about this phenomenal book that is sure to cause a stir. Now, while this book was written for men, we will get into it later that this book is also great for women trying to understand men. And as a man, I would say that this is one of the quickest ways to get into the male psyche for people that are not into psychology or Jungian therapy nerds or whatever you want to say. This is practical. These are the guys you see in your life, and they have come up with this amazing archetypes. And then not only that, but later in the book, there are applicable ways to help you if you fall into one of these extreme archetypes. And we've all been there. So a little bit about them. David Coates saw men like those featured in his book Be Less Dickish while practicing psychotherapy in San Francisco. He is originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He enjoys crawfish boils and organic kale salads. When triggered, he tends toward a few of the quadrants we will name in the Be Less Dickish model. He currently resides in places warmer than San Francisco and continues to travel, write, support men, women, and couples fighting and figuring things out. And he's also teaching. Corey Kilpack was Coates' client before collaborating on Be Less Dickish. He worked on a trawler in the Bering Sea and has been a missionary, investment banker, hedge fund manager, tinner, alcoholic, and in his words, I quote, douchebag, dick, asshole, and pussy. He is married to Keely, and he is a dad, grandfather, an entrepreneur, and just a regular fella who enjoys restoring old Lamborghini tractors with his family and friends. So, if that introduction didn't intrigue you, then I don't know what to tell you. You might want to flip to one of my episodes that is more intellectual and focused on the field of counseling or philosophy, but I'm telling you, if you are wondering what the hell is up with men and how do we help them and how do I help myself if I'm a man and I don't know why I do these things and why I react this way, then this episode is for you. And I really think it's going to touch a lot of people. So, without further ado, let's get to that interview. Ready, robot? All right, welcoming to the show, we have David Coates and Corey Jesus Christ, Kilpack. All right, I'm going to start that over. Yeah. Hold on. I literally want to say Kilpatrick. God damn it. Okay, hold on. Kilpack. I'm going to start that over. Welcoming to the show, we have David Coates and Corey Kilpack, the authors of Be Less Dickish, the definitive self-help book about men. And basically, guys, this is a very interesting book. So far, what I've been reading, I want to keep reading it. And it's very accurate. And it's, if you're an American male, it kind of scared me like a little bit about how on the nose it was about certain things. So I want to get to that, but could you both tell me who you are and why you wrote this book? Whoever wants to go first.
I'll jump in. David Coates, and I am a marriage and family therapist. I'm a psychotherapist in California. I've been practicing about 18 years. I wrote the book because I've always been fascinated with profanity, and I was also fascinated with the way that profanity showed up in my practice and how people used it. And I thought, like, damn, these words are intense, like asshole or douchebag. And like, what can we do with these words? What do we define these words? And they're used in such intense ways. and there's so much charge, there's so much intensity, and I wanted to do something positive. So I started exploring these words and doing research and like creating a whole system around them.
Excellent. Yes. We'll get right into those words very soon. Corey.
And I was one of Dave's clients using those words prolifically in those sessions.
Okay.
Offending Dave, probably talking about Dave's other clients and his neighbors. I may have used them to describe Dave. Who knows? It's been a long time.
Right. And you've had 45 jobs, according to the back of this book.
Yeah, I've moved around quite a bit. So yeah, I listed everything going all the way back to the college days. So yeah, I've worked on a factory trawler. I've been an investment banker. I was the general partner of a hedge fund. And now I'm a founder of a software company. So done a lot of things. And during that time, I had a rough spell and had to work a lot of stuff out and landed in Dave's office. And we ended up working on this project probably about 5 years after I stopped seeing Dave. 4 or 5 years, he reached out to me with a manuscript, and I was blown away. Like, I was really touched by the work that was in there, and just dove in with Dave, and we fine-tuned it, created these characters, and now you have it. Now you're shocked.
Yes, I was slightly shocked. Full disclosure, my partner, if you want to use correct language, or wife, told me to turn the cover around. And so I while I was reading it, I would prop it up in different areas of the house so that she would see the cover, which appears to be a male's legs, but the words of the book are over the genitals. So
yes.
But she found that particularly for part of her upbringing, she's very actually hilarious and brash, but like part of her upbringing, her initial is that's too much, right? So let's talk about that. Go ahead. What's up?
You want to know what's interesting about that cover? We had to pay money to get that picture, and we didn't just pull that out of the ether. We had to buy that, and that
this isn't one of you.
No, that is actually the most famous, most photographed penis in the history of the world. That is Michelangelo's David.
Oh, it is it? I did not realize that. Wow. Okay. And
yeah, wow. The irony of it all, right? And that's and the funny part of that is this is Michelangelo's David, and we put it on there like it looked censored because of the words. There is nothing less censored than Michelangelo's David. And there it is. Like, had we put it on there and said, this is Michelangelo's sculpture, we wouldn't have had to put a black box on it. But
that's
here we
a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That is probably that's quite a famous phallus. So yeah. So this book, I mean, we can't get into the book without talking about the crisis of men's mental health that's been going on in the United States for, I don't know, maybe since before I was born, but especially pronounced in the last 20 years, and getting increasingly worse with young men who are finding themselves with feeling like they don't have much of a purpose. They're not sure what to do about masculinity. They're not sure what to do about, career. They're not sure what kind of relationships they want. They don't know that there's different difficulties with emotions. They have some very unfortunate examples to follow. And thus, you could see the crisis of men's mental health playing out all over the news in the U.S. and in the conversations we're having in classrooms and in the psychotherapy rooms. Comments about that. Is this part of why you wrote this book, or was this just? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot. I've seen a lot of men in my practice, and what we didn't want to write like a flowery self-help book, and a lot of what we lay out is like traps that men fall into, like extreme behaviors that men will spin out into. And we've given them names like asshole, dick, douchebag, and the one we'll probably talk about later.
Yeah.
The final one.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So like when men aren't supported in being who they are and in a process of self-discovery, they're going to tend to fall into these sort of strategic orientations, right? And so if they fall into the strategic orientation, they're not really being who they are. And in those extremes, we're saying it's befitting of the word asshole, for example. So we're going to define these extreme archetypes as a way for men to see like where they go when they're triggered. Like when they're triggered at work with a partner, they're going to tend to habitually move in one of these directions. So we're saying, hey, let's look at what you do when you're triggered. And let's look at extreme behavior. And through exploring extreme behavior, you can see your own behavior.
And Paul, too, one of the things we focused on and we worked hard on, it took us many hours to get through this, is answering these questions like, what are you really saying? And what is just a metaphor? And one of the simple processes that we started in this that kicked this book off into a whole new level was asking the question, what is the difference between a dick and an asshole? Like, it seems like such a simple thing, and it's thrown around where people use these words and they don't really understand what they're saying. And it's almost like, as long as I can call it something bad, I don't really have to identify what it really is. I've just said it's bad, and we're stopping there. And what I was pushing Dave for is that clarity to skip, even though we're using these words, to get to a point where, like, let's define what the behavior is without just using a metaphor. And your question, it almost triggers me. Like, we're going to talk about triggers, but it's like when you use the terms toxic masculinity, or you look at these experiences for men and boys and their partners and their moms and everyone around them in terms of you're part of this generation or that generation. We try to look at men. What was the boomer generation or the greatest generation like compared to Z, Y, X, and these others? I'm like, no, we can't do it anymore. We're just stereotyping again. And I kept telling Dave, like, we got to get this down to where we can tell and show people what it looks like when you make a selfish decision and hurt someone compared to making a selfless decision that also hurts someone. and that was a tough process to try and also describe it without saying it's just toxic or it's just systemic within a generation or an age, or that it's new. It's not new. And that's why we also picked the archetype word. It's like, this goes back way before these generations.
Yeah, I like that, because I think that I can't remember what the word is called, but when you just say, oh, it's toxic, or oh, it's a boomer, or oh, it's a Gen X typical, or oh, it's a millennial, that's dismissing the conversation, and it's taking it away from any sort of further discussion.
Yep.
And I don't remember what that word is that shortens everything and stops the discussion. But essentially, that's what we see in the media, and unfortunately, I'm hearing that, dialogue, and so because of the crisis we're facing, I think that there's also a backlash toward men, and because of other men's behaviors. So we have to figure out, how do we break into a deeper conversation? And I do think going into the archetypes of what's really going on for men here, and this book is written for anybody really, but for men especially, to kind of to say, like, this is not a flowery self-help book, feel good, 10 easy steps. And I like that, because I feel like it got really real real quick. Because I could identify when I was reading the archetypes, for instance, the asshole one, I could say, oh, I could see myself doing that at certain points in my life. When I was really mad, I kind of acted like this, and all of the archetypes, which we'll get into, I could see myself like doing these things when I was extremely upset. And I think that you guys nailed, because obviously your examples of the characters, like each one has a character associated. He's obviously the most extreme example, that you could think of, but there are males like this. I've met males that are the walking archetype, especially the dick, where he's just like, everything's the world's fault. And so then he has like a carte blanche to be to be a dick to everybody. He's just mean. He's cutting people off. He's saying F this, F that. He won't tell you what he really thinks. He's like a storm cloud walking around. Nobody wants to be around him. He's manipulative, but pretends he's not. Nothing's his fault. If he ever acts out, it's somebody else's fault. It's the world's fault. It's the environment's fault. And so, I mean, you see this playing out, right? But how do you, we have all these clinical words for it, right? But how do you break through to people that are, who are not wanting to talk a bunch of clinical, proper PC content? And I think that you had to take the risk of the publishing industry and other people canceling you to go here. And to be honest, it took me a few minutes. I was like taken aback. I was like, these guys are either really brilliant or I need to burn this book. I'm not sure yet, right? Because when I received it, I was like, because I almost thought, like, is this the archetype of the machismo man writing a self-help book? For a second, I thought before I read it, right? Just my impression. Like, listen, you little dicks. This is what you got to do to be a real man. I'm Joe, whatever my name is on the podcast, anyway. But it wasn't that at all. It was appealing because we can all identify, any man I know can identify with acting like one of these archetypes. So one of the things I'd love to do is I don't want to give away the whole book because I really think people should buy this book. Okay. Gas is $8 a gallon. Just buy the book. Okay. It's like $14 or something. It'll last longer than your tank of gas to go get your Arby's. Okay. Just buy the book. And let's go over the archetypes, but I don't want to give away the fixes. Your whole half of the book seems to be about trauma and coping, not coping, but like figuring out how to get out of these sort of traps. So are we cool going through some of the archetypes?
Let's do it.
All right. So, well, let's start with the asshole, since that's the order of things. So, David or Corey, do you want to talk a little bit about the asshole?
I'm going to take this one, Dave. You ready?
Oh, yeah. You're up.
So the asshole, like, to put it bluntly, doesn't give a shit and he hurts people. And the core characteristics of this orientation or this person or this behavior is that when things happen, the priority for the asshole is himself. Like, he is focused on him. He is concerned about him. You can't say he doesn't care because he cares about him. He is just shameless or unaware of the consequences of what he's going to do to other people and how they're going to feel about it and how much they're going to care. And he may get a charge off their reaction if it helps him, or he may not even know. But what you see in an asshole is someone whose priority is to get his and get it his way, and to not care about the consequences, even his reputation, if it's not relevant at that time, and to take care of himself. And in the extreme, the asshole is aggressive. Like, he will go out of his way to hurt people. He will spend money to hurt people. He will build a life around hurting people. That's the extreme. In less extreme forms, this is just a very assertive person. Like, he is direct. He's on a ride. He's going a direction, and he's not looking around and making excuses for it. So when you look at the extreme parts of this, yes, it makes you scared. It should. It's supposed to. He's trying to scare people. That's the intent. And you look at it more dialed in and in control. This is a person who is driven to get stuff done. So there's an attraction to these guys. Now let's talk about the character, Jonah.
Oh, yeah.
What was your reaction to Jonah, Paul?
Oh, man, I've seen this guy,
Yeah.
His name wasn't Jonah, but I've met this guy, selfish, like you said, aggressive. The character just made so much sense. Like, he can't get enough. Nothing satisfies him. His emotional release seems to be through like you said, power exchanges where he puts another male down, or he cheats on his wife and is getting his some of his power through sex and domination. And he seems to be angry all the time, but we're not really sure at what. So my reaction was, this guy's walking around everywhere. There's like 24 of these guys in the bar on Friday night that when you walk in. So I don't know.
I think that you look at a character like Jonah, who's the prominent asshole character in the book. I think that's true. Like, no one looks at this guy and thinks, oh, this is outrageous. They look at this guy and think, like he's just like someone I know. And this is what, and Dave is better at describing this as we get into these details of these characters. But there's something I always challenge people with, and we'll go through this as we get to the other characters too, is as many times as you say, I know someone like Jonah, or I've acted like Jonah, or there's a million Jonahs around me, and some of them I know and some of them I don't. Almost to a rule, we can ask someone, do you know someone like Jonah that you actually loved? You may wish they were different. You may, like, maybe it was your grandfather, maybe it was your uncle. He was an asshole, but man, you couldn't wait to see him again. Like, there's always some connection to an asshole in our lives, and we're like, yeah, we know someone like that. We wish they hadn't gone off the rails, but we all seem to also have some real core connection to someone like that. Wouldn't you agree, Dave?
Yeah, these are people we know. These are people we're related to. And these are people that have a big impact on us. So it's personal, right? It's not an abstract character. Like, we really do our best to like bring him to you, and you know him.
Oh yeah. He's people are attracted to this directness, right? He's obviously successful in the book as a contractor, I think, being in charge of different construction projects. And
most people wish they gave fewer fucks, right? So he's shameless. So he's able to take what he wants, and he's not worried about his impact on other people. Whereas most people, were overly conscientious. Oh, I want what I want, but I don't want it to upset anybody. Right. Or I want what I want, but you don't want to give it to me, and so I don't really want it. So like, he comes in and represents just kind of raw desire. I want what I want, and I'm not even aware of how it's impacting you. And honestly, most men need more of that. Like, we don't want men to be aggressive about it, but all these archetypes have gifts. So the asshole's gift, which Corey was hinting at, is like, he's assertive. There's a time to say, I'm going to fucking do this for me, and I don't care what anybody thinks because I need to do it. And like, men like that who can claim that for themselves, they tend to be more vital as fathers. They tend to be more vital as men. There's a time not to give a shit what other people think. Now, if you're only ever not giving a shit what other people think and acting selfishly, you're in trouble, right? You're stuck in that one quadrant. That's not a man that we need. But men need to get that they have the right to say, I'm doing this for me, and it doesn't matter how it affects other people sometimes.
Yeah, I like how you're bringing out the positive, because that's actually a good way to go around the archetype. So the extreme archetype in the asshole, and this is interesting because he's so selfish and he's so shameless that he won't stop until something major nails him. Like, he won't stop until his wife leaves him, until he gets corruption charges, whatever it might be. And we've all known people, or we've all gone through a micro version of that, but it is important for men to be assertive. The issue here is that in the archetype, he's extreme to the point of emotional abuse, essentially, upon other people.
And destruction. He's destructive.
Yeah, he's destructive, right. And I liked how the therapist was talking in here. He curses his employees. They should kiss the ground I walk on. His subcontractors, his cleaners, architects, clients, lawyers, and neighbors all come in for a jab or two. The Middle East, the governor, the gardener, drivers, cell phone providers. If he can't personally fire someone or get them fired, he wants to make their life hell or their job impossible. He mocks my profession. ridicules the art on my walls, and asks how a real man could listen to people complain all day about erectile dysfunction and their problems with hoarding. I thought that was hilarious because it almost sounds like this guy talking. Like, can you believe these people? Can you believe it? You know, and just like, I'm like, God, I've had conversations with this guy, right? And we've all been, I think at some point, if you want to be authentic, I remember a time in my life where I was like trying to be more assertive. And I think my experiment went a little awry for about 6 months or a year. And I became a bit more assertive than I probably, a bit more neglectful of people's feelings than was good. And there was consequences for that. And I think that is how this book speaks to you, because it has this cool, it's not a textbook, you know, it's not like, well, this is what happens. And it's a story of this guy and then how he gets into therapy and what happens to him, but it's short and sweet. And there's some highlighted points.
It's really character driven.
Yeah, I want to get to the piece that you just read. There's a quote. There's a line in there. We worked on that section so much. There's a line in there that really sets off the asshole in a distinct way, describes him in a distinct way compared to the dick who's just complaining about all these things.
Right.
And that is the line that says, if he couldn't personally fire them or make their life hell or whatever the words were, that's the key part of that rant, is he looks at this and says, all right, that's bothering me. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to deal with it. And I don't care if I fire this person and they can't buy milk or $9 gas. I don't give a fuck. Like, if he can't fix it, it's either not relevant to him or he's going to bitch and moan and move on. Like, he's not really worried about peace in the Middle East. He's worried about whether he can break something and to change the things that are bothering him. And that's the difference between the asshole and the dick, is that factor of, hey, he'll just fire the person. He'll just crush him. He just hurt him. And it won't phase him. It doesn't phase him at all to do it.
So somebody the other day, somebody described to me their uncle that they really liked, but that was kind of a total dick or a total asshole. Excuse me. This is the asshole. And they said to me, this is the quote, and I don't even know. This is like a friend of mine. They said, well, he was, kind of an asshole, and they said he couldn't understand mental health. Why would you ever want to save somebody from killing themselves? If they want to kill themselves, I'm going to be the first one to give them the rope. That's his quote. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, right. Like, the empathy is down there. You know what? More for me. Get out of my way. You're taking up space in the economy. Go at it. Jump off the bridge, right? Like, that was this uncle's quote. And they said they just couldn't understand how they could ever be a therapist and like care about people that want to die. And I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, listen, that's a good lead in, because the dick distinction is like, the dick is also selfish. He's also concerned about himself and his experience. But whereas the asshole is shameless, the dick is conscientious. He's very aware of you and what you're thinking and what you're feeling, right? The asshole is oblivious to you and what you're thinking and feeling. The dick is very aware of what you're thinking and feeling, but only insofar as it affects him. Mm-hmm. Only insofar as it affects him and he's a victim of what you're thinking or feeling. So he may say, his girlfriend walks in and he can tell she's in a bad mood. And his first thought is like, great, she's in a bad mood. Now what do I have to fucking deal with tonight? Now this is on my plate on top of everything else. So he's aware of others, but only insofar as he's affected. And we all know guys like this. And he's the victim of other people and what they think and feel, because it affects him.
Yeah, Dave, the example I would give right here is Paul, this uncle example. The asshole saying, like, here's a gun, here's a rope, here's whatever it is you need, like, get out of my way, like you're dead weight. And the dick is looking at his watch and saying, shit, do I have to go to the funeral? Like, look, I have to change my whole schedule now because this guy killed himself. And now I'm going to miss the game. I had tickets. Look, like, this guy goes up and kills himself. And now I got to rearrange my whole weekend. That's the difference between the asshole and the dick.
He's affecting me, the prick.
Yep.
Oh yeah. God. at the risk of revealing who these people are, I've known a real great dick in my life, and literally this was part of the discussion, which was some major family catastrophe happened, and they would not stop ranting about how this affected them going to this concert, literally, and they just couldn't believe it. And I'm sitting here going, are you hearing yourself? But I mean, at the same time, we've all been a micro version of this, right? Where it's like, we've got our plans, our expectations for vacation, and then, I don't know, the weather happens, and we're a victim of the weather, and all we do is then piss and moan our whole vacation away because it's cloudy and rainy in the tropics. And then instead of having a good time with your significant other or your friends, you're like, I can't believe it. I get to go parasailing. This is such bullshit. It rains in the tropics. I can't believe it. Yeah. I brought t-shirts and I had to buy a jacket from the gift store. That sort of thing.
And on a micro level, like I do a ton of couples therapy. This is what couples therapy is a lot of. Like, he does this and he shouldn't do this because I feel like this when he says this. Like, couples fight about, hey, what you're doing is making me feel a certain way. I'm a victim of what you're doing. And because you're doing this to me, I can do whatever the fuck I want to do with you. And that's the ultimate dick position. Like, yeah, I raised my voice at you and like fucking called you a bitch, but like, look what you did to me yesterday. It always comes back to that. Look what you did to me. Whatever I did to you is because of what you did to me, so I'm justified. That's classic dick positioning.
And so we're basically in a Middle East conflict for infinity. You did this, you escalated on me, I'm going to escalate on you. You're going to escalate on me, I'm going to escalate on you. And it's justified. It's rationalized behavior. But the difference is the Middle East actually has oil. In this dick conversation, you're fighting over just bullshit feelings and interpretations, and there is no goddamn oil. That's true. That's a good point. Right. Well, and you're ruining the oil because let's just go further with the metaphor. If you're in a relationship, you have to both work at it. You have to both work at it to refine the resources and have a good time and have a happy life and a happy atmosphere in your home. But if you're constantly like, that's it, 7th inning yesterday, you didn't put the dishes in the way I wanted, and now I'm justified at drinking this 5th of Jack and getting angry and going in the garage and yelling, and then you want to say that I'm acting out. Well, fuck you because you messed up the dishes. Like that's the position, right? It's it.
And so
selfish, but yet. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the call for the dick is like, hey, we're responsible for the way we feel. And so many people want to make others responsible for the way they feel, and then they're justified in their reactivity. We're saying, be less dickish, do less of that. Incrementally, notice ways that you want to be a fucking dick or an asshole because someone did you wrong. And just notice that. Notice when you get pulled into that, because we all get pulled into this when somebody does something that hurts our feelings. It's very seductive, this one.
Can I go on a rant, Dave? Do I have your permission as the therapist? I don't want to hurt your feelings. You guys are professionals. I'm just a long-haired fellow. But hey, you guys are talking about this like we've all been there at a micro level. And what Dave's describing, and you're pointing out too, and you brought it up early with the generations and other terms like toxic masculinity, is that we're all experiencing this at a macro level. We're experiencing this in an institutional level, at an ideological level. And this is, to me, one of the reasons we kept this name of the book. It was Dave's original name when I saw the manuscript, and it had to stay because this is the most atoxic. They're not anyone's worse than the other. But this one is exploited at a macro and institutional level in the present conversations more than any others, where we're saying, oh, all men are toxic and we're all victims of all men. All men and all races, except for this one, are racist, and we're all victims of what that race did going back forever. And there's all these conversations happening all the time that are always in the context of I'm a victim, or this group is a victim and I belong to it because of what other people are doing. And so this logic that you're talking about at a micro level is being conditioned every day, nonstop. And it's gotten to the point where we have to accept that logic to belong to the goddamn club. And so when Dave points this out to people at a professional level, like, this is you describing your feelings and your reaction to what someone else did. You're not even describing your own reaction to your own experience. You're just making up this, like, you did it to me, blaming, shaming, everything else. It's like, yeah, that's breakfast in America. That's what you get. Like, here we are. So there's my rant. I'll turn the rant off.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It's getting to that point because it's again, it subverts discussion, and it inflames people that hear segments of this, right? So it escalates people that are in the group being attacked. And as white males all sitting here on our Zooms, our group bears a lot of blame for things in the past and now or whatever, but we're not a group. We're all individual people. How do we have a discussion about, deeper than just he's a white male, so he did this and he has, like, how do we get deeper and also acknowledge, yes, these things happened? Because what's happening, I'm seeing, is it's driving some of this dialogue is driving reactionary anger because some men feel personally attacked. I didn't do that. I'm just a plumber from Cleveland. I didn't do any of this crap. I'm just trying to keep my family afloat here. And it gets them more and more and more angry, right? Mm-hmm. And when you can't win an argument, you start insulting somebody. And when you can't win by insulting, then you resort to violence. And so I think we're seeing more of that on a very strange, twisted way, because it does happen in the day-to-day, like at jobs and workplaces, right? People become violent, in relationships. But we're seeing this sort of unhinged anger at different groups and people that represent those groups, both on all sides, because of the dialogue you're talking about that's in the media, that's in social media, that can somewhat be constructive, right? Like, we need to criticize things and change things and be and make progress. At the same time, it can also be destructive. Like, people will say, well, now you're just acting like the oppressor, right? You're going so far that it's not you. Like, where's the middle ground here? How can we have a discussion, essentially, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it feels like it's more polarized than ever. And the more polarized things get, the harder it is to have a conversation. This book says, we're not political in this book. We don't take a side. We say, what is the experience you're actually having in these circumstances when you're triggered? Stop thinking about who said what or who's right and who's wrong. Just like, come back to your experience. Please come back to your experience. Don't go into abstraction. You can't get anywhere when you're in abstraction. What are you actually experiencing, and where do you spin out towards? We want the reader to get really curious about that first. And not absolutely. That we need to end, that we need to end racism, whatever that would mean, before I'm going to feel okay. Right. Like, we need to stop living in that framework and start living closer to ourselves.
And that's really important because, Carl Jung and other people said, we've got to do our inner work, or else the world is just going to go to hell. Essentially, that's not a quote. That's a summary of what they said. And I see that because it's difficult to enforce, but on an individual level, if people work on themselves, right, and work on where they're at, and then their relationships, and in their company, and in their group, and in their family, the things on a larger level will get, quote unquote, better, whatever that means, right? Maybe more peaceful, less polarity. We get along better. But if we, and this is something I see as well, this is a whole nother discussion. I want to get to 2 other archetypes, but people, I think Carl Jung said the best political and social work you can ever do is to withdraw your shadow from others, right? And so when I'm dealing with something in my life that is, especially young people in their 20s and teens, But I'm afraid to deal with it. And so then I project that onto some sort of news item, political item, social item, somebody else, other groups, other people at my school. And I'm not dealing with it. I'm projecting it. And that can lead to a lot of confusion because we're not going inside and figuring out what's going on with us and how we can overcome this obstacle or this issue. So,
and once that happens, the only logical move is to blame someone else. Like if it's out of your control because it's so big and you're a taker of the circumstances, the only logical interpretation is that you're a victim of those circumstances. So you're right. When you start framing this in, everything is happening that's too big for me to affect. It's outside of my control, and you're not looking at what's happening inside this epidermis. Like you're done. You're just blowing in the wind, blaming other people.
Right, and it's difficult. So I think that actually, I've talked to people about. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, like as a segue, like or you become what we call a pussy in the book. And I want to say something about that word because it's a really charged word. And it's a word that we thought about not using, but we just couldn't have any integrity with ourselves if we didn't use the word, because that is the word that men use to describe a certain kind of deferential, submissive, kind of cowardly man. So we use the word that is the actual word. And it's not the ideal word because it's got so many connotations in relationship to the feminine, but we used it and we own it. And so that man, he is selfless. He's not in touch with his desire, his vitality, and he's very aware of what other people think and feel. So if you think about that combination, he's selfless and he's conscientious of others. This is a man that's not really occupying his own space. He's not taking up space. And I think a lot of men are in that position now with the backlash towards men where, the dick is going to be a victim and bitch and moan, and the pussy is just going to feel kind of responsible and that he should just be quiet and be deferential. So he's the submissive, disempowered man, and he is everywhere. You can see this man on the street with kind of the hollowed out eyes and the stoop posture, just like he's defeated.
Yes. I think this one speaks to a lot of males. I definitely went through a phase where I felt this way, where I was just deferring because I think it was probably a reaction, is that I didn't like the machismo, over the top, hyper masculine, get out of my way thing I was noticing. And so I would just be like, whatever makes you happy, I'll go with that. Whatever makes you happy. And what happens is then we aren't really a person. We're not really saying what we think, and we can build up resentment or other and not have clear, authentic relationships. I remember Jack Kornfield, if you know who he is, he's a Buddhist teacher. And he talked about this in one of his lectures. He used different words because he's Jack Kornfield. But he said that his first wife, he was in Boston. He'd just gotten back from this retreat, like a 6-month, retreat, because he's becoming a Buddhist monk. And Buddhists, you want to be able to see things go by. Life is suffering. This is a very don't send emails. I know what Buddhism is. I've read the books, but this is just what Jack was interpreting in his young years, was that he needed to defer and be peaceful at all times. And so his wife would say to him, do you want to go to the Italian restaurant? Do you want to go to the Mexican restaurant? Do you want to go to the American bistro? And he goes, everything's okay. All food is the same. We all come from the same place. We all eat, and then we digest, and then we take a nap, and I'm okay with whatever you want to do. And she would just go crazy at him. Damn it, Jack, tell me where you want to eat. And he would be like, I just want to make you happy wherever you want to eat. She's like, I'm not happy because you're not telling me where you want to eat. Because she wanted to have a relationship. She wanted to have an exchange. Yes. And he had taken his meditation to the extreme where he wasn't engaging and asserting himself in any way. And he actually divorced her. They got divorced. And then he met his partner, who he's with right now, and founded the Institute. But, this reminded me of myself in some ways when I was younger. And just you think you're doing the right thing by not causing trouble, by kind of being meek and
Yes.
mild. Everything's fine, you know. I got a good job. You know, some people like me. I've got a reputation. I don't want to embarrass anybody. I don't want to be a burden. What do you want to do for your birthday? I don't know, whatever you want. And so the issue is that you're not being vulnerable. And am I right about that?
Yes, 100%.
You're selfless, but you're too conscientious. You're submissive. You're not being vulnerable and going, hey, you know what? When you said that hurt my feelings. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a big one in relationships. If you're in a relationship with somebody, they don't want you just to say, I'm happy all the time. I'm just meditating here. I just love you so much. You're just the best. And they're like, I just didn't do anything you asked me to do. I didn't help you do any chores. And now you're telling me I'm the best. I think that's bullshit. I failed you or something. You know what I mean? Like people want a relationship with somebody, and to have a relationship, you have to have opinions and you have to have feelings and you have to say them. Right. So that's what I kind of took from this. I want to see what your takes on it are, but I feel like it's like good intentions, right? This guy, he's got the best intentions all the time to be the nice guy.
Yeah.
And how many nice guys have I got in my therapy room? All the girls like the biker guys and the douchebags, and the frat guys. But I'm the artist. I'm peaceful. I wear linens. I listen to the Grateful Dead. I like Tori Amos, and you know, I can't get a date. And I paint my pottery, and nothing wrong with any of these things. But it's like I'm just trying to be harmless too much. And then they can't get a date. And they're like, why do they always date the mean guys? And I'm always the friend. I'm in the friend zone, you know.
So the character that we use to describe all this in the book is George. And I've been asked by many people named George now, a couple of them, I shouldn't say many, to change that name. but George it is. So tell me, Paul, like we talked about this with the asshole. When you were reading about George, you got through these vignettes and you saw him in these different scenarios. What was your reaction to him as a person, as a character? If you knew him personally, like what does he make you feel like as you're going through the book?
Well, I'd be very
annoyed. Guy, George.
I'd be very annoyed at George because if I'm asking George a question, he only cares about my response. He doesn't care about what he thinks. He's trying to do something like people please me or get my approval or make sure he doesn't make waves. And so I don't really know George. I'm annoyed at George. I don't really know what he thinks. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure who he is. He seems sort of like a waifish enigma, you know, like he's kind of like a seed floating in the wind. I don't know him, and I'm also annoyed at him. I like that he wants to make peace, but he's made too much peace. You know, I like peaceful people.
This is great.
But you want to feel the guy, right?
Yeah,
like
I want to know him.
Hit the tennis ball back and forth with you, and a pussy in the extreme, he refuses to do that, and then you're left with the burden of the connection. It's on you, right? Like he leaves it all on the other person, and that's why women who are with men who fall into this archetype, they're like, God, he drives me crazy. He doesn't ever push back. He doesn't bring himself forward. I can't, and it's kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts being with this guy. And he slowly saps the vitality out of the relationship because there's no there with him because he won't risk anything. He's hiding. He's not connecting. He's not being vulnerable.
Yeah, I go ahead. I'm looking for the page where Kayla has her thoughts about him.
Yeah. Keep looking, scrambling through there. The writing this, and we've talked about this many times too, was really tough for me. And because I had a reaction similar to yours, Paul, going through and creating this character and discovering this character with Dave and trying to picture what this was like as we're presenting him in all these different scenarios, including getting inside his own head in these therapy sessions. But what we show and what we found as we explore and learn more about George is that he's having the same fucking hopeless experience with strangers while he's driving his car, with customers at the bank, with subordinates at the bank, with his fiance. Like, there's no intimate relationship. There's no anonymous relationship. There's no contractual relationship. There's not even just your everyday run-in with a damn cop or anything, where he doesn't take this position of, I'll give you what you want. I'll feel better when you have what you want and you're in control, to the point where you're just like, who the fuck is this guy? And yet he doesn't do anything to offend you. He only does things to make it your way. It is a puzzling, disturbing puzzle that you can't solve when you're living and experiencing George. You're just left wondering, am I going crazy?
Yeah. And in George's world, right, because it's strategic, the only way he can self-regulate is if you're okay with him. So I'll be whoever I need to be so you're okay with me. And then if you're okay with me, then I can feel okay. But I don't know how to feel okay just on my own. And we all do this sometimes. When someone we love is upset with us, it's very uncomfortable. And we just want them to be okay with us. So we'll act selflessly. We'll act conscientiously. There is a time and a place to be in this quadrant. There is a time and a place to be here. But when it's habitual, like Corey said, it's impossible. It's maddening.
Right. Yeah. There's a time and a place. And even, you can be here daily to a point where you don't, you want to balance, what does my friend or partner need from me? But you can't do that for 2 hours in a row. It's like, it's a give and take. You have to come in and out of it. I wanted to, before we go to the positives and go to the next archetype, I wanted to just read what his wife was saying about him. The waiter comes by with chips and salsa. This is George. Kayla, why don't you order something for both of us and we'll share? George asks, his head in his hands, not even bothering to glance at the menu. Kayla sighs loud enough for George to hear and asks for a margarita. She catches George watching her. She does love him. He's so devoted, she thinks. I know he'd never leave or do anything to hurt me. I can count on George to be, well, George, and he's super cute. Kayla remembers the contractor visit. Oh, hey, where are we with the mold situation at the house? How did it go today? Oh, God, George thinks. Well, I met him. I showed him the bathroom where he thinks there's some black mold. He shined the light in there and said that there was. He needed, what was the word? Remediation, I think. I don't know exactly what he meant, and I don't know what to ask him. He seemed really busy, and I didn't want to ask too much. I just figured that, well, you could call him and talk to him about it. You're so good at handling stuff like this. Kayla, shaking her head, quickly orders another margarita. Okay. So, I'm like, oh, my God. It's just like, it's such an archetype. It's an extreme, but we've all been there, I think, at some point.
Yeah, quickly orders another margarita.
Yeah, she's drowning herself and going home with this cute guy who has no opinions. And
if you keep reading, he takes a sip of a margarita, but he's careful to do it on the place where she's already removed the salt with her lips, because he wouldn't want to remove any of the salt from her glass.
I did read that part. I laughed at that part. I would keep reading. Yeah. Which side of the glass should I sip from? Just sip from the glass anyway.
Gosh, when I hear other people read that with the inflections, I just crack up. It's just, you just see this guy and there's no reason not to like him, but it's maddening. Like, you can't help but like George. He is by far the most likable character in the book. And if you had to pick any of these characters as a neighbor, you would pick George. Totally. Hands down, you would pick George. No question about it. Like, you'd rather live next to George than Jonah. That's for damn sure. You'd rather live next to George than Eric. That's for sure. So he's the guy that you want to like him, and he drives you crazy. And he does not have any bad intentions in doing it. Yeah. So that was a fun one to write. I'll tell you, it was challenging. Yeah. Challenging. Very interesting, Brian.
Yeah, I like it. I want to let you talk about the fourth archetype in the sort of compass you've developed in the system, the douchebag. Can we talk about the douchebag?
Yeah. If you're doing a video recording of this, hold that chart up.
Oh, yeah. I actually
book.
don't use the video. I actually only use
all right. Well, the chart's available on the website.
Yeah.
So they can see it there.
And so sorry. There'll be website links. There'll be everything people want to get to. But yeah.
Yeah. So of all the types, there's something about the douchebag that everyone has kind of a visceral knowing of. And so in our model, the douchebag, he's the imitator. He's not being himself. He is shamelessly and enthusiastically portraying an image of someone he'd like to be, right? So there's no there with the douchebag. So in that way, he's selfless. You can't feel his authentic self. He's just in the character. And he's shameless about it. He is shamelessly promoting that this is who I am and this is what I'm about, and it's fucking awesome. And you're like, what? Because there's such an incongruence between your sense of him and how he's presenting himself. So this is our douchebag. He's the imitator. And he's also everywhere. And corporations, for example, love this archetype because they're selfless. They're going to promote I work for Google. Google's the best. They're going to shamelessly promote the brand. And
it's called Alphabet. It's Alphabet.
Alpha. Oh, I'm so ashamed.
Get on the board. Get on the team.
So this guy, he's not interested in who he really is. He's just interested in who he wants you to believe him to be.
Yeah. And
Corey, why don't you add on to that?
Oh, me or Corey?
Well, give Corey another shot.
So, I'll go
Corey.
around to get to you, Paul, here, and I'm going to cut you off. But we've started with this asshole who is selfish and shameless. And what he had in common with the dick was they were both shameless. They were both selfish. One was shameless and the other one was hyper conscientious. They were both looking out for their own self, but one didn't care what everyone thought and the other one cared too much. And what the dick had in common with the pussy was that they both care too much, but one is all about me and the other one is giving it all away. And now we're down here trying to see, where does the douchebag fit? And what he has in common with the pussy is that they have abandoned or given up themselves as the priority. And the douchebag has done it shamelessly. I don't care what you I don't give a damn what the consequences are. I'm going to give myself away for this act, this image, this character, this costume. And the authentic self is gone. It is gone. Where the pussy is I will do this for you. I will do this for you. And I care so much. The douchebag's over there on the side saying that me, and this is where I could do another hour and a half with you guys about trauma, is that real authentic me, the one who got hurt, the one who had to struggle, the one who didn't have to struggle, the one who had a perfect life, the one who didn't have a perfect life, whatever that is, fuck it. That person is gone. I'm looking over here now. I'm this guy with these cool clothes or these cool shoes or this cool act or this cool job. But the hurt kid, the achieving kid, the ambitious kid that was authentic to them, it doesn't have to be traumatic. It doesn't have to be abusive. That is gone. And you are looking at a goddamn act. That's it. And it is a really, really good act. And there is a lot of rewards in the world today for putting on that act. It is not just a coping mechanism. It is a survival tool, and it pays big. So we see it a lot. We reward this behavior a lot. And like Dave is saying, now we have corporations and institutions saying, we can help you with your act. We got the shit. We got the solution. We can make your act even better. And the cycle continues.
Well said.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, just some of your examples, the Sigma Alpha Epsilon douchebag, the New York Yankees douchebag, the triathlon douchebag. I'm going to add a few of my own. The Tesla douchebag, the CrossFit douchebag, the Burning Man douchebag, the conservative or liberal douchebag, the vegan douchebag. I would go to like the outdoor grilling douchebag, the jogging douchebag, the foodie douchebag, the Yelp douchebag, the person who tries to sell you stupid MLM chocolates douchebag, like the super religious douchebag. It just goes on and on. And so it's like I'm giving up my true identity to identify heavily with something that I think is going to get me maybe something, or I'm not exactly sure, but you see this all over the place, and we've all done this, but it's like part of me feels like it's sort of to fit in. I don't know if that's true on your way, but like I lived in Chicago for a while, and there's this team called the Chicago Cubs. You might have heard of them, and they're a baseball team, but they're not a baseball team. They're a cult. It's a cult. And it's real easy to join the cult. I've been in the cult. It's very fun. And all you have to do is wear a hat or a blue shirt, and you're immediately accepted by millions of people, and they will high five you. They will love you. You will go to their hot dog store. You will drink old style beer, and you are a part of the family. And if you live in Chicago and you don't like the Cubs, you better like the White Sox or just get out of the way, because but like it's a whole thing, and it's a cultural movement. And it's kind of like, I feel like these corporations got real smart and all these MLMs, because they're like, you know what? Religion's killing it, tax free, but they got this guilt message, guilting you into giving 10% of your income away. What if we make it a fun party and you just buy all our swag, do all our stuff, subscribe to our newsletter, and instead of religion, it's like something fun that you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to be ashamed about. I have a Tesla. I'm saving the environment and I'm cool, right? I root for the Cubs. Well, why? You're from Florida. Because it's the Cubs. It's like giving up your identity. But if you identify, and I've been here, but I've also been among people that it's like there's so much about one thing. I don't even know who they are either. I don't know who they are. Just like I don't know who George is. I don't know who they are. It's just like everything's about these 2 or 3 things that they do, right? I'm an EDM fan. That means electronic dance music. I'm an electronic dance music fan. I go to all the festivals.
I'm glad you clarified that. I had a horrible image. Just
sorry. No, I've heard that term and I had to find out what it meant.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, electronic dance music. There's these new electronic dance music festivals that are like
totally everywhere.
Everything, right?
And the thing is, some of this is great though. Like it's fun to be a Cubs fan. Like it's fun to be an LSU Tigers fan. Like it's fun to go on the ride. You get a sense of belonging. You get a sense of connection with other people.
It's fun. There's no hard conversations.
And in extremes, right? When there's no there anymore because you're completely lost in being an alphabet employer Cubs fan. And then you're becoming a douchebag. So again, our model is about like, hey, all these quadrants, there's a time and a place to hang out there. Just don't go to extreme there. Don't get caught there.
So one of our good friends is actually a partner in the book and did the graphics for us, Nate Jensen. And he's a Harvard attorney. He's been a friend of mine for a long time. And when we're going through the kind of the analytics of the book and preparing the graphics, we're talking about Jed, the character that you read about, that's the douchebag, and his Rolex watch and his Prada shoes and the Tom Ford and just the shit, the Xenia. Like he's got it all, and he doesn't end. He wears a different costume in the evening. He wears a different, he's got a costume for everything. He wears a different costume when he rides his bike. Like it's all over. But Nate challenged me. He's like, well, what if Jed, this character, really is a connoisseur or enthusiastic, and he studied these Rolex automatic watches, and this isn't part of his costume because he actually knows what he's buying and he knows the value, and he can wear it for 2 years and sell it for more. And like, he's got this down. And it's an important part of learning about Jed and these douchebags. Like, it's not the thing that makes you a douchebag. It's not the Xenia suit. It's not the shoes and the Prada and the Rolex or the Tesla. That's not what makes you a douchebag. It's what you do with that. And in this case, Jed was wearing it as a goddamn shield. Like, so he no one could see what he really was and what was really happening. All they could see was his loft, his girls, his vacations, his cocaine, whatever it was he could give them that they could see. They would enjoy that and not really see him.
And on a macro level, this is what Instagram is. For some people. I mean, it depends how you use it, right? It depends how you use Instagram. People use it for all sorts of things. But if I use Instagram in the most stereotypical way, it would be that I am pointing out all of these things I have to hide it's all the good moments of my life. It's that amazing brunch I had. And it's hilarious. If you've ever hung out with people that take pictures for Instagram and it's like they're like business or side business, it's intolerable. They're like, I need you to move over here. The lighting is here, this and that. Okay, put the salt on the burger. Like, it's like a whole thing. And it's not real, right? The rest of the morning was hell. And actually, it was hell when you took those pictures for 10 minutes. I've known some people that have had some wins on there. But the point is that it's shielding you. It's not the thing. It's not that I have all these Cubs posters. It's that the Cubs have consumed me. I don't even know who I am anymore. That's all I live. I live for that, right? And I'm putting that image out there. So I think that one's an easy identifier, I feel like, for people.
It is, but there's a question in there which you may have caught in the early section on the douchebag chapter, where we ask, and I can't remember what voice it's asked in, whether Dave's asking it, the narrator, it's part of the description, is how can this guy who keeps a catalog of his sexual conquests be considered selfless? Like, we really put it out there. Like, you look at the things that he's doing and how it's affecting other people. How do you explain that he is doing this and he is selfless? And the distinction that is so important with the douchebag when you're applying it personally, like, great, we can apply it to the consumers of Instagram. Like, we do that. If you want to pick a convention, we can apply it to those people too, right? Like the Raiders, the black hole, we can talk about that one too. Like the Cubs, we can talk about that. I was a Mormon missionary. Like, you put on a costume every day. So there's a experience that applies to all of this. So, but what's important is that the real douchebag, the harm that he is doing, is that that person, he or she, is kicking the best, authentic, real experience and real life out for all this other bullshit. And it may be one of the greatest gifts that we have. And look, you guys are the professionals. I'm just a guy. But I will tell you this, when it comes to trauma, this ability that the human and people have to put on this costume and go on with their life and cast the real experience aside is probably one of the greatest survival tools this species has ever developed, and we may never have anything better. So when you look at what it takes to be that core douchebag, it is a gift that we can even do it. A lot of people would not survive or wake up tomorrow and get on with their day if they couldn't. So I don't want anyone to walk away from this and think that the douchebag is all just a corny shit show, because this is the application of an experience or a coping mechanism that we have to develop empathy for and understand. And I'm ranting my ass off, Dave.
No, but that's important.
They're not going to invite me on these podcasts.
No, but that's important to understand, is that while we're making jokes, right, to identify these archetypes and the stories, every one of these archetypes goes to therapy and has a difficult experience or a challenging experience. And the point is to try to get deeper into the conversation and have empathy, right? Yeah. And to bring it away from the stereotype. But the archetype helps you identify what's going on, which leads to the whole second half of the book, which I don't want to give away completely. But if you could tell me a little bit, now that we've understood the strategy of the archetypes, like what, and we help us identify, and there's some things in there that you've already commented on the chapters about, like what to do or what they could do or what they were facing, right? The challenges. But then, in the rest of the book, it looks like you're trying to help people here. So can you tell me about that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, we're joking about these extremes, but they're all redemptive, and they're all doing the best they can, right? All of it is just strategic behavior to deal with their pain, to deal with their trauma, to try to get by, to try to be accepted, to try to feel a sense of safety and purpose in the world. Like, there's a lot of compassion for these guys, in part because Corey and I are these guys. Like, we don't make any bones about it that they're like out there. They are in here. And we talked all the time about, like, yeah, this is when I spun out into this pussy quadrant the other day when this guy got in my face. Like, it's live for us. So there's a way that we're bringing levity to it, because it is also funny. But we take them on a ride, and they're in my therapy office throughout the whole book, like parsing through how they got to where they got to. They learn to understand, Jonah learns to understand how and why he became an asshole, and how and why it made sense. In fact, it was a great thing for him to become under his circumstances. Same for all the guys. And then they unpack it. They do the work.
So yeah, that brings into that kind of concept we get from trauma-informed counseling, which is, a lot of the things that you've done all while growing up were all survival mechanisms, and they were adaptations. And obviously, maybe your current self is ashamed of some of those things that you did or said, but you were doing the best you could at the time, because that's what humans do. We have a story in our mind, and we go, "Oh, I guess I'm doing this now," right? And we're adapting to circumstances. That's the whole basis of the Enneagram too. I mean, it's all like it's a trauma reaction is why you kind of had this personality type. And then you came up with this formula for being less dickish, which I think we'll just preview it. I don't want to give it away, but the trace method. Elaborate on that a little bit?
It's worth talking about that, because the TR and trace is just trigger and reaction. Most people live their lives being triggered and then reacting and then repeat these habituated cycles that most people are caught in. And so the ACE in the trace, TRACE, is awareness, curiosity, and then experimentation, which is a lot of the therapy work. Is, okay, whoa, I'm triggered. I have the awareness that I'm triggered. I'm curious about that. I'm interested in what's being touched in me, a younger part of me. What's the fear? Like, getting people curious about what's happening in their body. What's the story they're telling themselves? And then experiment. Like, I'm going to experiment with being a little less dickish right now. And that's the basics of trace. And
well, I love that when you said I'm going to experiment with being a little less dickish, because that fully falls into my philosophy in psychology. I don't know if I stole this or who I stole this from, but there's some psychology people in our profession, unfortunately, that think you can flip a switch, right? Mm-hmm. Just memorize this, these 10 distortions and stop it,
right.
And use the rubber band on your wrist and snap yourself every time. And it's like, no, that's not how human nature works. We came into life, and we're living our life, and we've developed habitual patterns, whether we like it or not. So thus, if I'm going to start changing and I'm in one of these quadrants, and I'm really hardcore in one of these quadrants, I can only take little steps at a time. Yeah. I can't just, move to another city and change my name and change my profession that quickly. Things happen slowly. So I'm going to be a little less dickish. I'm going to try to recognize this, have awareness about it. I'm going to get curious about my experience, instead of feeling like I'm just trapped in this hell of rinse and repeat. Right. So
yeah, we want people to be actively working with themselves. Like, change does not come easy. These structures that got laid down, they're part of our survival system. They're part of our identity. So we don't make any big, bold promises. That's why it's called just be less dickish. Do a little bit less of this thing that you tend to do and see what happens. Like incremental change.
Yeah. I would add too, like the trace method that we talk about late in the book. We do it all in the context of how these characters apply a healthy response rather than an extreme reaction. And it was fun writing this with Dave because obviously I've been David's client. I've been in like I've had those rants that you're reading about in the book. I've been in those chairs and watched Dave and, you know, describing those experiences with the therapist. We had a great perspective because there's his perspective as the therapist, and I was watching him. Like we get to describe this in the book, but as we try and put it into words for a reader like you, taking triggers and reactions was really, really hard, but also fun. And because I would just keep drilling Dave, like, all right, it's a trigger. I own a pistol. It's sitting out there in the gun safe over there. That's got a trigger on it. What in the hell is the difference between that trigger and this metaphor, this thing that you're coming up with? And we kept diving and digging and peeling it back until we figure out, like, what exactly is this? And when we describe what is a trigger and what is a reaction, we had to get to a point where we could say, this is what it is in real terms, like no metaphors, no bullshit. Yes, it's triggers. We've accepted that term, but what's really happening? And we identify triggers as, hey, this is just the information. It's just a thing. It's just cars lined up on a road, traveling at a rate of speed relative to a posted sign on the side of the road, and you're having your own goddamn experience. Too bad for you, but it's just cars, and it's just a road in a line. That's it. End of story. And so taking something that simple like triggers and being able to identify it as it's just information. Now look what this asshole, this douchebag, and this dick are about to do with that information. That's where it gets interesting, and you start recognizing yourself in these triggers. It's going to get crazier. Like if you think you saw something so far, you ain't seen shit.
Yeah, this is so paramount. Like when we say like, oh, you triggered me or I'm triggered, all we're saying is I'm affected by information from my environment. I'm having a response to information from my environment. So we wanted to break it down to the actual experience. Like I'm having this reaction. Something happened out there or a thought happened in my head and now I'm reacting this way. That's all we know. And we start from there, which is actually a beautiful place to start from because it's the only thing we know for sure that's true is I'm having a reaction.
Right. And how do you live in the awareness that you're having a reaction instead of being the reaction and acting it out? I think that exactly. Is kind of where we're coming from.
That's the everything. That's the
right,
ACE,
yeah.
Like through awareness, curiosity, and experimentation.
Yeah, I love it.
You know what's interesting about that, David, is Paul's brought up the example of Instagram a few times on this call, and we've talked about that. Is like if you had these people show up in your office and you were asking them, like, why are you having this experience? Why do you feel this way? What are you responding and reacting to? And you really dug down, it'd be surprising how many people would say, I'm going to use a terrible example here to just set this thing into the ditch. I'm having this reaction to what happened on January 6, 2021. And if you really dove down to ask these people, like, all right, that's your reaction to January 26, what are you really reacting to? Well, they weren't there. They got it secondhand. They got it from a friend who already had a feel like it. Ultimately, they ended up reading something on Facebook, and then they saw a link on Facebook to something else. And you really get down to like, what are you really responding to? It's a piece of a story that you read on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you go. And that simple acknowledgement gives people a little bit more perspective on what they're really experiencing. And I know that's a triggering extreme, not to make fun of it, but it's like you can really like get down, like what is the information? What am I really responding to? And it's like, yeah, I just spent an hour on Twitter in a hive of bullshit, and now I'm all jacked up. Yep, that's what you got. Like Good for you. It worked. You're jacked up. It's working.
Yeah, and that's and the hard part about it is, we have to practice. We have to practice these methods. We have to do the work. That's, I don't know why I'm quoting Carl Jung so much, but he said something like, what we don't deal with in our inner self will come to us in our outside lives, and we'll call it fate, right? So if we're not dealing with stuff in our minds and our reactions and our triggers and our behavior, and we know there's something going on in here, eventually something is going to happen to us, and we're going to call it fate, when it's actually us. We're helping drive this car, right? We're helping. Yeah. We were in the Twitter hive for an hour, and then we punched somebody. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We threw our phone at Denny's. We're like, I hate Twitter, and then the cops were called, and then we're a victim. It's Twitter's fault. Yeah. I'm suing Twitter.
Yeah, all because of this thing that happened 3,000 miles away.
Right. I'm
now being arrested by the cops. Yeah, right. That's
exactly right. I mean, it's a reaction to a reaction to a reaction to reaction. Yeah. So anyway, I want to know. We have a little bit of time left, not too much. I want to know how has this publishing this book and writing this book changed both of you? And I have a selfish question, which is, are you going to make an audiobook version?
Yeah,
Dave, you're first.
Well, the short answer is there's already an audiobook version out, and Corey reads it, and he's spectacular.
What? Where have I been? Okay, well, I haven't been on Twitter enough to find it. Where is it on Audible or what?
It's on Audible.
Yeah, Corey's got a great bluesy voice, which you can already hear from this podcast. So he reads it great.
Oh, this is exciting for me. I love audiobooks.
And how has it changed me? I mean, a more vulnerable answer would be it shows me I've been a clinician for almost 20 years, so I'm very competent in that configuration. But that's facing another person. So for me, it's shown me like how much I struggle with like talking about this book and like going on social media and like bringing this work out into the world. That's been the big part of my journey since we published it about 9 months ago. Is I want to get this work out in the world, and it makes me really fucking uncomfortable to talk about my work and my journey and like to teach. I'm much more comfortable in a therapist like role. So for me, it's really been confronting, and I've had to deal with my own impatience with myself for not trying to get the work out more than I have. And I'm just resistant as shit. I am resistant. I'm overly conscientious here, to use our model. And I'm not able to just I'm doing it more and more, but like, that's been the journey for me. Is like, it's a really different role than being a therapist. And it's a great edge for me because I really believe this work has already touched a lot of people. We've gotten amazing feedback. And I'm like, why doesn't that motivate me to get it out in the world more?
I even have another edge for you. So after you spend after you spend the next 5 years promoting this, and I'm gonna push you. I'm gonna be. I don't know you, so you can say fuck off. But essentially, I think you got to push this and go to those like book festivals and all that shit. But really, where I feel like this is going, I feel like this book could go is two ways. You could also go to making a companion piece for therapists, how to work with men. And because these archetypes are just, I think you guys probably like sweated blood over making these archetypes. They're perfect. It's perfect. It makes so much sense. It's scary. And I've read a lot of self-help books. I've read a Robert Bly, Michael Mead. I read all this stuff, right? And James Hillman. And it's all really intellectual. This is applicable. So I feel like right there, therapists need it. So what I think you should do is make a thing for therapists, how to work with men, how to work with these archetypes. How do you help them deal with men who are difficult, who maybe don't want to be in therapy? Maybe they were threatened. A lot of men, they say, I'm coming to therapy, I'll be there. And then 5 sessions in, they go, yeah, my partner, my wife, my job. They told me if I don't go, I'm fired, I'm divorced, I'm broken up with.
Yeah.
You don't find that out till session 5. So I think that would be cool. I also could see this. I don't know. This is a little bit, I'm a little bit of an idealist, but like, how they used to have men's retreats in the 90s and they'd like play bongo drums and like cry and like roll in the mud and scream and stuff. Well, I think we could update that with this book and maybe whatever kind of things you guys are into. I don't know, some
go to a
some cool
NASCAR
activities.
race.
Yeah, NASCAR. I mean, you could go to Talladega and just have a stand. I don't know,
Yeah.
but anyway, I'm gonna go there. I feel like this book has legs. I think it's just like anything, everyone's trying to go viral, and it takes some time to go there. So I'm just encouraging it.
No, I believe in the book and the project 100%, and just like for me to be someone that can stand up and say, we're going to talk about assholes and pussies and dicks and douchebags, and the way that you're an asshole and a pussy and a dick and a douchebag, I'm still working up to it. I'm still working up to owning the content of the book and the intensity and the charge that's in the book.
Well, it's somewhere inside of you, obviously, because you wrote it.
I know.
But maybe it's just not. Maybe you need a few tattoos and a personal trainer. Maybe I don't know, that would yell at you. I'm just teasing. Anyway.
No, but that's been the richness since we published it. I mean, the book was its whole ride, but since the book is published, it's like, gear up, kid. Your life is changing, and I'm navigating my own resistance, my excitement, my not knowing how to do it. So here I am. I'm fucking tracing my ass off in my own process.
Love it.
So,
Yeah.
And Paul, I feel like that was a personal jab. I've been sitting here for an hour and a half with my arm wrapped in cellophane because I got a sleeve tattoo yesterday and hasn't been exposed to oxygen for 24 hours.
Do you want to show us this tattoo? Oh, nice. Whoa, did you just get the whole thing done?
Got the other side done.
Oh,
I got the inside. I would show you, but it's still not.
You can't. It looks cool.
Yeah,
it looks like a lot of ink.
Yeah, and we're probably 75% down for 80%, somewhere around there. We got a little bit more work to do.
Yeah, well, sorry for personally attacking you.
No,
I'm teasing.
Corey, I'm curious how life has changed for you since we put it out there.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
And when we were writing this, it took a few years to get through it. We were processing the characters, then we had the words and the grammar, and then we went through the whole process to get the audiobook done. And it was more work than I expected, and it was more fulfilling than I expected. It was, and getting it done, seeing it come in the mail and getting the reviews that we've been getting has been profound. One way that it's changed me and really affected me, and Dave and I have talked about this in detail and privately and some recorded conversations like this, is how many people have come to us and said, this particular section just made me cry. Like I was in tears, and you can't predict what section's going to do that to people or why. And we have no idea all the time, but it surprises me when people tell me the section and I'm like, wow, I didn't see that coming. Or I wouldn't have guessed that. And I think, for me, how it's changed me, I had the luxury, if you want to call it that, of having my wife with me every step of the way. She read the manuscript out loud, and we took turns on a road trip. We read the original manuscript from Dave, and we were both touched by it. Like, this has legs. Like, there's a lot of value in this. And then going through a 2-year process and her being part of every line, paragraph, word, and telling us, all right, you guys have crossed it here. There's one too many fucks in this sentence. When at the point where you hit 15, like 13 might be your limit here, or whatever. but really having the Kelly around and seeing these characters, and we talked about Jonah and Eric and George and Jed and these guys. But if you noticed, every one of them has a Kayla and a Shaylee, and there's someone on the other side of all of this. And it's been amazing to be able to put words to the other side of what's happening to this weird behavior. So there's that. And then there's the other piece, which is that in every single one of these characters, there is something in there that is from me personally. Like there is something that's described that you are almost seeing it through my eyes, my experience, or my journal. And being able to look back at this, and especially having Dave as a friend now and a former professional relationship as a therapist, and being able to say, yeah, we got through that too. Like I got to the other side of that too, to the point where I could actually put it in writing and own it. I don't give a shit. Like it's like that realization that like, yeah, some of that bad, awful, ugly shit, that was me. And yet here we are writing a book and explaining this in a way that is going to touch people. Like that, I can't help but be humbled by it, but also I get to be proud of it too. Like we wrote a hell of a book. That is a hell of a book that we put out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like this podcast could be 3 hours, but due to time constraints, we're gonna have to wrap up here in a second. So what I would just say to the listeners is, if you were at all intrigued by this, conversation, unrehearsed, no bullet points, no prescription, going on, pick up the book. It's on Audible, which if you're busy these days and you want to get your steps in, just, put on the Audible book.
Yeah.
Or if you like to sit in a chair or whatever, get the hard copy. And I think I will just say as a reader that it reads real quickly. I read, I don't know, 40 pages like one evening and another 40 the next. It was just real quick, and I was intrigued and I was engrossed. And so that is rare as a book reader. I'm a big book reader, but it's hard to find a book, especially a self-help book, that I'm like, oh, good, I can't wait to see what's next. Self-help books, I'm like, oh my God, yawn. Where's the one point I can use in my practice, or what's going on here? But it's like, I've heard this before. I haven't heard any of this before except on the playground with name calling, but it has some very good application. So and then there's the cultural viewpoint. So I want to thank you both for making time. I know that we're in 3 different time zones right now, and that was pretty cool to coordinate. And I'm really excited to see what comes up next. And I'm going to put links for all of the book and any other websites or whatever you guys want in the notes of the podcast.
And let me say one more thing. I think it's important, and that's to potential women readers that I wrote the book with women in mind, because I want women to be able to see and understand bad male behavior, and to not get pulled into it. To not get pulled into like mothering the pussy, or going along with the douchebag's bullshit, or like apologizing to the dick. I want women to stay in their center and to be able to see what's going on and demand to be met in a centered way. Because it's so easy to get spun out by these guys, because it's powerful, it's compelling. And a lot of women will say, I just don't understand. I don't know what's going on. Or they want to he's so wounded, I want to help him. I'm like, no. You can help him by seeing the dynamic that's being played out, seeing what you're being pulled into, and saying, no, thank you. I'm not going to meet you out there where you're the victim, but I'll meet you in here where we can talk about your experience. So I just want to put that out there. I didn't get a chance to mention it, but I want women to understand men, and I want women to call men into more mature behavior.
Oh, 100%. I love that. I'm actually going to recommend this book to a lot of women I know, because I think that women have more power than they may believe in their relationship if they're able to understand how the male is thinking and why they might be behaving this way. They can really be instrumental for him to get the starter going in the car to do his own work. Right. I think that the male's got to ultimately do their own work, but it starts with some boundaries and some authentic conversations instead of whatever trauma response the woman is falling into or the man.
Don't get pulled into bullshit.
Yes.
Name it, see it, and provide better alternatives.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be sure you can edit this. What I'm about to say, you can edit this out too. You can just tell these women that here's some men who will mansplain men to you.
So as a joke the other day, somebody said, somebody was like, oh wait, what's mansplaining? And so then I proceeded as a joke to over explain it for like 5 minutes until they realized what I was doing and threw something at me. But it was fun. It was fun. I just mansplained. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right. It was great having you guys on.
Really fun, Paul. Really fun. Thanks for having us.
Sounds good.
Hey,
and
I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Yep.
There's a knock at your door. You don't even recognize a stranger. It's you from before. Trying to warn you all about the danger.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician Podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please share it with people you know. I would surely appreciate it, or leave us a rating on iTunes. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am now an official consultant and can provide 20 hours needed to become EMDR International Association certified. I am hosting groups online and in person. For details, check out my websites, counselingsupervisorgr.com or healthforlifegr.com for more details. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians in the Grand Rapids area at Health for Life Counseling Grand Rapids and the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss, and while these are based upon literature he has read and his experience in the field, they should not be viewed as a definitive opinion on this subject, or any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you are in a crisis, please call 911 right now or the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. Are you a young person of color feeling down, stressed out, or overwhelmed? Text the word STEVE, that's S-T-E-V-E, to 741-741, and a live, trained crisis counselor will respond. Did you know that you could support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org? That's right, bookshop.org. You can order online from the comfort of your own home while supporting local businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not a member of your local counseling organization, I implore you to get involved. The Michigan Mental Health Counselors Association, the American Counseling Association, for examples, are promoting best practices and making sure that mental health services are available and accessible by the public. Until next time, I'm wishing you all a safe and peaceful week.
Is it all a game of bait and switch your brains and follow your leaders to hell? Is it all